Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are covering Laughing Dragons MXP Tacoma, the modern 20K four-slot regional qualifier headline event. So we've got a lot of awesome magic to bring you. We're only in round two, but we have, I think it's, something like 13, 14 rounds of Swiss plus a top eight for you tomorrow. Noah Walker and I today. We got Brad Rutherford also on the commentary team, switching in and out. So yeah, I mean, if you're watching now, make some time for later in the weekend too, because we're gonna have a lot of fun, and we have a great match to bring you for this round. Noah, you want to introduce these players here?
So looks like we've got Alexander Lim, bring to light Scapeshift Master. Been playing this deck for a really long time. Really excellent with the deck. Excited to be able to watch him, you know, play it here. And then some people might be familiar with this Cedric Phillips guy. He's been around. I'm incredibly excited to be casting one of his matches this time around. Uh, Looks like he's decided to bring Temur Rhinos. Probably, I'd say, looking like the boogeyman of the format right now from my perspective. It's everywhere. The deck is super duper strong, uh, very consistent. So, gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, right before we came live, Noah was like, "Oh, how the tables have turned that we're covering Cedric," and it's true.
Yeah,
It is a rare opportunity. Cedric, of course, like beloved household name in Magic. But some people don't know he's got a really, really strong history of being a competitive player, Pro Tour top eight, the works. And here we've got him playing in his own backyard with Temur Rhinos in Modern. Alexander Lim, I had the pleasure of covering him a few months ago at the last MXP event in Portland, where he made top eight with this self same Bring to Light deck.
yeah. The Bring to Light deck really interesting, really exciting deck. What I would be really worried about if I'm Alex is the fact that a lot of these Temur Rhino decks, their main source of interaction is Force of Negation, which just so cleanly answers this Bring to Light that it's going to be tough, to for your namesake card to resolve in a lot of these scenarios. I guess that's why we're seeing three copies of Teferi Time Raveler and other stuff like that. So Alex will definitely have a lot of play here, and playing a deck with cards like Supreme Verdict of these copies of Rhinos at the same time is going to be huge for him. So it's going to be an interesting one to see how this one plays out.
Interesting is the right word, and part of what makes Alexander such a scary opponent with this Bring to Light deck is there's so much going on with that deck. It's got a combo finish, it's got these control elements like Supreme Verdict, as you mentioned. Teferi Time Raveler is a really, really powerful card, and you kind of just never know what Alex is capable of. If you try to, fight him on one angle, he might sidestep you and say, well, actually, the game is about something totally different. So yeah, I mean, expect the unexpected when it comes to this deck and this matchup. One game he might be fighting over the Crashing Footfalls itself with his Teferis and his sideboard cards. Another game he might be racing to a quick finish. Another game he might be sort of going toe to toe, answering the Rhinos, after the fact. And any mix of all the things I mentioned is also fair game.
Definitely. I mean, one thing that is going to be a little bit tough for Alex here is if Cedric is able to just play one of his Cascade spells this turn. Alex doesn't have too many cards that are just like clean, profitable answers, right? Like he could play a Teferi Time Raveler here. I'd say that's probably one of the best cards that he could play. It could tick up, or if Cedric had cast a main phase Cascade spell, it could just answer one of the Rhinos there. But aside from the Supreme Verdict, a lot of Alex's answers are just straight one for one stuff. We've got these prismatic endings, this leyline binding. So if Cedric, yeah, just resolves his Cascade spells, they're going to be really, really potent threats.
So huge moment here. Alex just going for the turn three Teferi Time Raveler. He's saying this card is my best card in the matchup. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to cast it. But Cedric able to successfully respond with Violent Outburst. Here you see, just who wins the die roll being, of course, a really meaningful aspect of the game of who gets to cast their 3 mana play first. So Alex is going to resolve the Teferi, but he cannot safely Plus, now in the face of 2 Rhino tokens, he's going to have to -3, get his card worth of value, and then presumably lose the Planeswalker the following turn.
You know, it's not exactly what Alex was looking for here. You know, he was kind of hoping, oh, Cedric 3 mana, no spell again. But Cedric did have that Violent Outburst, so he's going to have to just kind of a little sort of 1-for-1-ish trade. You know, the Teferi replaces itself by bouncing one of the tokens. Cedric kind of keeps around half of his card around with one of the tokens surviving and finishing off the Teferi. So not perfect for Alex, but he can't be too upset with, you know, this Teferi both soaking up 4 life and answering half of the Crashing Footfalls and also replacing itself.
So Cedric is, you know, with his body language representing that he may additionally have Force of Negation that he's considering using on Teferi. You know, Cedric's type of player who's certainly capable of representing something that he doesn't have in his hand, but that's one possible decision that he could be thinking about there, even after the Crashing Footfalls resolves.
It looked like he had an actual decision there, so he's decided, though, yeah, I'll let the Teferi answer half of my Crashing Footfalls. You know, I still get to keep around this Rhino, and maybe I'll save my my counters for something a little bit. Alex does have 4 Bring to Lights in his deck, and Cedric does not want to be caught without some sort of good interaction for one of those.
All right. Lots of Rhinos. So a card that we've already mentioned 2 times is Supreme Verdict. That is probably the card Alexander needs to stay in this game. Also notably uncounterable. That even applies to Force of Negation. But it's probably only a 1 of, and if Alex has to Bring to Light for it, Cedric can just counter the Bring to Light.
It's a tough one. You know, as I was saying a little bit earlier, a lot of Alex's answers are 1-for-1s. So this is looking a bit scary. You know, we've got 14 points of pressure in play already. He needs to find some answers and quickly. That's for sure. He could have, you know, something like another Teferi and then, you know, maybe be able to cast one of his cheap interaction spells like the Prismatic Ending, but or Leyline Binding. So
yeah, that's exactly what he's representing here. You know, fetching for the untapped land, playing Teferi first. Now Cedric, we don't know if he had Force of Negation. It's also possible that he had Force of Negation, but his only blue card was that Shardless Agent, in which case who knows what's going to happen. But Alex is fighting the good fight. He's going to try to bounce 1 Rhino and then Prismatic Ending another. And then, you know, he buys himself at least a couple of turns with this sequence.
yeah, I mean that's really huge here, especially because, you know, now it's not even close to, you know, before Cedric had 14 power worth of threats in play, and now he only has 6. So the 2-turn clock turned into at least a 3-turn clock, and the Teferi soaks up even extra time by you know, the Shardless Agent having to attack it. So really good play here from Alex. He is setting up this game to go late, which is exactly what he's looking for.
Yeah, exactly. He's now bridged himself into the late game where his Bring to Lights and Scape Shifts are now online. And that, of course, is a huge difference compared to the first flurry of action.
So interesting decision here from Cedric. I think he was deciding, you know, I need to kill Alex, right? Like that is how I'm going to win this game. Maybe I just ignore this Teferi altogether and just go for the face, you know, apply some more pressure later on. But I think ultimately Cedric decided the only way that I'm going to really survive one of these potent, you know, threats, you know, a Bring to Light, something like an Omnath, is with his instant speed interaction, you know, whether it be a Mystical Dispute or something else. So he decided, I need instants to win this game.
A blinding hand of all foils from Alexander Lim. Looks like a bunch of lands, including a Valakut, a Leyline Binding, a Dryad of the Elysian Grove.
Is that P that I'm seeing there as well? I can't. really pick out his whole hand, as you were saying. But if that is a Valky, I think that's going to be really strong. We might see the flip side cast a
It
nice
is indeed.
Tybalt.
Yeah, Valky Tybalt. For those who haven't seen that, that's one of the cool things about Bring to Light is, in addition to setting up your combos, you're finding these one-of silver bullets. What you can always do as a 5-mana go-to play is Bring to Light for Valky and cast it on the Tybalt side. So you're getting one of the best planeswalkers available in Modern for the price of 5 mana.
So yeah, taking a quick look here at Cedric's hand, it looks pretty excellent to me. I think he's got a subtlety. He also has a mystical dispute, and then as well as this force of negation. So he's got a plethora of interaction here for all the threats that Alex could possibly produce. It might be based on seeing Alex's hand as well. Didn't look like he had that many threats. So these 3 pieces of interaction might just be enough for Cedric to take over the game.
Yeah, I think it's the case that Alex is going to need to double spell on some key turns, and here it's pretty good. He gets to force Cedric to use one of his permission spells, then he gets Leyline Binding a Rhino. That's not bad, but I think Cedric is really well prepared if the tempo of the game is just Alex plays 1 spell per turn and Cedric counters it on a few turns back to back to back.
Definitely, yeah, and Cedric, being really conservative with his cards there, he had the possible answer to the Leyline Binding with the Force of Negation, but he decided, I think it's more important for me to have multiple answers rather than spending, my one answer. Getting rid of both of my, powerful blue cards to answer it. So I think that's a really heads-up play here from Cedric, holding on to the Force of Negation. Ooh, here Alex playing around the Mystical Dispute by playing an untapped land before casting the Dryad. Really heads up here.
Yeah, that matched up really, really well against Cedric's Mystical Dispute. So I think Cedric's just going to have to say okay here. And then Alex will get 1 trigger off of the Valakut right away, which presumably kills Subtlety, but Cedric can reload with end of turn Violent Outburst. So once again, I do think Alex is going to need another play to make this turn if he's going to keep his head above water.
Yeah, Cedric's hand being full of potent threats as well as all of this interaction is making it incredibly hard for Alex to keep up. Yeah, and simply that's just lethal because both of these Rhinos have trample, so game 1's going to go over to Cedric.
Yeah, good performance from Cedric there, both in terms of his deck playing out well, multiple Cascade cards on the play, but also just well navigated. He didn't rush things. He knew exactly what was important to fight over, and yeah, just executed the game plan as he drew it up. So here we have Bring to Light Scapeshift. I love this deck. I also feel like it's one of these don't try this at home type of decks, which I don't mean that literally. Like, if this deck appeals to you, definitely go home, give it a try, play some games. You'll have a great time. But it's also the case that Alex has played a lot. Every card exactly in place how he wants it to be. He knows all of the lines. He knows what to make the games about as he plays. And over the course of many, many tournaments, he's really been able to hone his craft with the Bring to Light Scapeshift deck in a way that's makes him a really fun player to watch. What what do you see as being important in this matchup from the Bring to Light side?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the biggest card that he has for this matchup is the 2 copies of Hollowed Moonlight in the sideboard. That's his answer to kind of, or sorry, his way to really profitably have an answer for the the Rhinos that is a clean 1-for-1. A lot of his cards, as I was saying before, he needs 2-for-1s to be able to keep up with Cedric's 2-for-1s. So that's I feel like that's going to be his way to kind of hopefully stay in the matchup. Yeah,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
then
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. And then from Cedric's side, Cedric kind of wants exactly what happened to him the first game to happen again, right? Play an early threat, have a resolve, get these rhinos into play, and then just stop Alex from doing anything for the rest of the game. With the subtleties, with the mystical disputes, with force of negations, that's exactly what Cedric wants to have happen.
So Alex has the kind of industry standard 2 Chalice of the Voids. You also pointed out those Hallowed Moonlights, which are going to be some of the best cards in the matchup. He has 2 copies of Dovin's Veto, which I'm sure is going to be a go-to against any Cascade deck. The 3 Teferis that are in the main deck. What he does not have is any cheap permission. So I'm not seeing Spell Pierce, I'm not seeing Flusterstorm, I'm not seeing Mystical Dispute, which that is, that is meaningful in terms of winning these counterspell battles.
Yeah, totally. He's relying less on the cheap interaction, like instance, I guess, like less on the permission, as you were saying, and more on like, he's got these leyline bindings, he's got these prismatic endings. They're not beautiful in this matchup, right? You don't want to 1-for-1 everything. You'd much rather, get a chalice down and that be your way of stopping the cascades, or Dovin's Veto to just straight up stop one of these crashing footfalls. But Alex also does have this 1 copy of engineered explosives, which could
Good point.
come in handy.
Now let's have a look at Cedric's side. Talk to me about these Prismari commands, because in the previous round I was typing up Flame of Anor. Cedric has a different card for the same mana cost that also destroys an artifact. What do you see as the pros and cons there?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Cedric is just kind of valuing, the fact that Prismari Command is always going to do a couple things, as opposed to the fact that Flame, while being slightly more, I'd say, powerful in what it does, all of its abilities are slightly more potent than Prismari Command. Prismari Command's always going to, maybe make a treasure and also kill something, or the looting could, come in handy, but also I want to be able to interact with the board. So I think Cedric is really valuing the flexibility of Prismari Command and always doing multiple things.
Yeah, it's a good point. The Flame of Anor, the individual modes are more potent, except the one that's the same is destroy target artifact. So if you're thinking, well, the main use of this card is to blow up Chalice of the Void, Prismari Command actually does that better because you're always going to get a second mode tacked onto that.
And maybe Cedric is thinking, I have a lot of other answers to possibly big threats, with my Dead Gons, and so maybe he decided he didn't need to answer big threats as well.
Chat actually has an alternative theory, which is maybe Cedric just couldn't get the new card, the Flame of Anor, because he does have Mutavault in his deck, which is that's the tech to pair with Flame of Anor because you can make it into a wizard. So it's kind of like a little bit of a disjointed deck building if you look at things in those terms. I mean, I could see somebody just saying like, "Hey, Mutavault's sweet and Prismari Command is sweet." So I don't know what the story behind this is, but that is at least a humorous theory.
No, I mean that is definitely interesting. Yeah, what I do really like about Mutavault in general in the deck is that, these crashing footfalls, when they resolve, they're 2 4-power threats, and then Mutavault is obviously it's a 2/2. So naturally, if you want to get your opponent down from 20, you could make the clock 10 and then 10. And Mutavault does that really, really well. A lot of these hands, if instead of having the Shardless Agent, you just had the Outburst, you're going to want to be able to end the game as quickly as possible. So having a land that also kind of doubles as, a clock shortener is really, really good, and I think a really intelligent add and a new one to see.
10 plus 10, love it. So here's end step, cycle Lorien Revealed. Lorien Revealed, one of the least obvious but sweetest additions from Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle Earth. This is a nice one because gives you improved access to, all your best blue dual lands, your basic islands if you're worried about Blood Moon, And then also it beefs up your blue card count in a format where Force of Negation and Subtlety are both really, really desirable cards.
Yeah, Urine Revealed, absolute all-star in my opinion. One of the best cards they've printed in a really long time. Like, and as you said, it's not exactly in our face as much as like these Orcish Bowmasters are and these the One Rings are, but I think it's a really huge addition to a lot of decks right now in Modern. And upping the blue card count as you said, and then also just being able to cast it later on in the game to draw 3 cards is huge.
So much different pacing in this post sideboard game. If this is nothing, 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 and then ice your land, to which Alex responds with yet another sideboard card that you and I have not yet mentioned, Veil of Summer. That's
Ooh.
not necessarily an obvious one to come in, but I'm sure that Alex has just played the matchup enough to identify the important patterns of like, hey, I'm going to protect my Teferi against your Force of Negation with Veil of Summer. Maybe this pattern is important enough that I get to counter your ice at a profit. But at any rate, that's a favorable exchange for the Bring to Light player. Also, just favorable conditions in terms of getting to the mid and late game with a clean board state. And let's see what Cedric can do. He's setting up for the ultra long game here
Oh
with to
yeah.
spend Crashing Footfalls on turn 4.
Cedric said, "I'm here for the long haul, man. Like I'm not trying to cheat out any 4/4s super quick. I just some nice honest gameplay. Hey, I mean that's what he has, and so he's gonna try to make it work. It definitely sucks, seeing Cedric's hand. It's like a bunch of fire and ices and not too many cascaders, which is playing exactly into Alex's game plan of like I want this game to go late so that I can resolve my expensive threats. So it's going to be interesting to see how Cedric is going to navigate a game like this, where his deck isn't exactly firing on all cylinders. He's doing things a little bit more slowly. So yeah, we'll see.
Cedric, ever the optimist, is saying, not only am I going to be alive 5 turns from now, but Teferi the Time Raveler and Chalice of the Void are not going to be on the battlefield for this Crashing Footfalls to resolve. Here's the first test of that theory as Teferi hits the stack. What's Cedric going to do? Ice the land, which Alex can just tap in response. Now that doesn't need to go to the. Oh, it was ice a fetch land.
Yeah,
That's
so
actually a really sick play.
I love that one from Cedric. That was Cedric did not want Alex to have the possibility to possibly have another Veil of Summer or his own Mystical Dispute or anything like that. He said, "Hey, I'm going to, in response to your spell, try to tap your fetch land, which I know you're going to crack, so that I can make sure that my Mystical Dispute is the only thing that resolves here." So that was really heads up play from Cedric.
Yeah, really cool play. And what I love about a play like that is Cedric's like he's not free rolling there. He's actually committing additional resources. He's throwing his fire ice in the graveyard because his read on the situation is that strong. He's willing to say, "Hey, I'm going to really cost myself a card out of my hand to play around this 1 mana instant that I believe you have." And here it might pay off because he's able to untap and resolve a Crashing Footfalls that would have been totally neutralized if that Teferi had successfully resolved.
Yeah, I'm thinking that one might have been off the top, which is exactly what Cedric was looking for here. His hand, had a little bit of interaction, but not too many threats. So finding a threat here that also interacts profitably with being able to attack these planeswalkers, even if one of them was answered, is absolutely huge here for Cedric.
Here comes Dryad with Valakut already on the battlefield, ready to go.
If you're Cedric, can't love to see a Dryad here. It blocks the Shardless Agent pretty well. It could set up for some good following turns. Already having this Valakut in play, so definitely an interesting one.
Ooh, but Cedric is prepared with the Subtlety. Now, Subtlety is not vulnerable to Veil of Summer because it's not countering the spell. So Alex either confirming that or just having a look for future reference. Alex has both Veil and Dovin's Veto, which is an interesting configuration of cards that can really, really help him in terms of resolving his own spells. They're not doing much in terms of defending him against the creatures that are already on the battlefield, though.
Yeah, it's looking like Alex is just kind of getting run over here. Wait, I think Cedric might have just drawn another Crouching Footfalls. I'm curious to see why he decided not to spend it. I mean, if the first one coming in 5 turns isn't enough, the second one maybe that's what he's thinking, or possibly he drew an endurance or something, and I just couldn't exactly see what he drew. But it's these cards that Alex has that interact so profitably with the blue cards in Cedric's deck, like the Dovin's Veto and the Veil of Summer, the counter spells, they do not interact profitably at all with these creatures. So it's going to be tough to see if Alex has enough time to kill these threats.
All right, so here's Dryad resolving, 2 land drops, 2 Valakut triggers, both pointed at the Rhino. Cedric attempts to dismember the Dryad in response to the second trigger, which, if the Dryad was to die, Alex would no longer have the requisite number of mountains and the trigger would fizzle. But Alex decides to win the fight with Dovin's Veto and successfully kills the Rhino. As you mentioned, Dryad 2/4 blocks the Shardless Agent, so he is fully stabilized at this point. Though Cedric does get to restock with that suspend that we were teasing him about all those turns ago.
Oh, it's coming. The Rhinos are coming. So I'm really surprised with how the last turn played out. If we're correct in assuming that Alex does have this Veil of Summer in his hand, because he chose to Dovin's Veto instead of Veil of Summer the Dismember. But now he doesn't have an answer for this Crashing Footfalls that's coming next turn.
Yeah, it's a great point. And at first, something that I noticed on a previous turn was that Alex was a little bit choked on his green sources of mana. Like, it was hard for him to deploy the Dryad and protect it from a counterspell with Veil of Summer. But once the Dryad's on the battlefield, you have any amount of green mana that you could ever want. So it was, interesting to see him choosing between those two options.
Certainly see how it comes back to hurt him if it does. But we've got a really nice little combo going on here with that Renin 6 off the top. Renin 6 rebuying these fetch lands with Valakut and Dryad in play is going to just be, a kind of constant stream for Alex to start killing off these Rhinos.
Hey, Lorien revealed hardcast.
Wow, and that's the other punish for deciding to cast the Dovin's Veto instead of the Veil of Summer. Alex didn't even have the option to counter this Yoriner Field.
And we can confirm that it is indeed a Veil of Summer. Alex seems to have a plan with this, because I would have been thinking about, like, am I just cycling Veil of Summer on the Lorien revealed turn? Because the last thing you want to happen is to lose the game with this stuck in your hand, never have an opportunity to use it. And then you also think about, like, you have a pretty deadly situation here with all these lands, Valakut, Dryad. If you could just pick up Bring to Light or Scapeshift, you win the game immediately. But it looks like Cedric is going to get at least one more turn here, though it's getting pretty dicey.
Wait, I think Alex might just have lethal. Maybe that's what we were missing. He played a land, which was 1 trigger, played a second land, which was a second trigger, and then can sack 3. So that's 15 damage worth of Valakut triggers. And I think Cedric was at 13.
So there is 1 fetch land sitting uncracked on the battlefield. Is that
exactly?
Is that
Yep.
accurate?
So he played. Yeah, it looks like that was just lethal.
Wow, amazing! Just Alex Lim winning that game with a collection of lands. he hardly had to resolve any spells at all, except for that 1 Dryad.
Yeah, I'm over here, being like, oh man, Alex just gonna die with this Veil of Summer in his hand, but like, no, he still had all these. He didn't even need to use the Veil of Summer and still had lethal. So that's really Alex showing, knowing what's important in the matchup, I think. and how he wants to use his spells. So pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a cool game. Much different from the first one. We saw Cedric with not the dream start for the Temur Rhinos deck. He didn't have anything on the battlefield till I think turn 5 there. But still, he made Alex fight for it. He had that really good play of icing the fetch land to ensure that Alex couldn't protect his Teferi Time Raveler on the stack. But going to game 3, Cedric's going to really try to leverage that advantage of going first and see if he can slip anything underneath the hate cards like Teferis, the Chalices, the counter spells.
Yeah, and we do see this one copy of Blood Moon in the sideboard for Cedric, and especially, being on the play, I think that could be really, really potent in the matchup, seeing as, Alex is trying to cast spells of a lot of different colors, and it doesn't look like he has that many basic lands in his deck. So if Cedric could resolve an early Blood Moon, it could just end the game completely.
Yeah, the Miser's Blood Moon, I love it because it's, as you said, it's both good in against the 4-color deck in stopping them from casting their spells, but also in a literal sense, Alex's win condition is Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, so that's a good element of Blood Moon as well.
And for Alex, he does have these 3 basic lands, so Blood Moon isn't just completely game over, as well as he has some copies of Beseiju and the Leyline Binding. There are some answers for it, but I think it's one of Cedric's best cards to kind of take over the game. But I'd say last game for Cedric starting off so slowly, he did put up a good fight. So
Noah, how would you do if I was to quiz you on all of the Blood Moon versus Dryad of the Elysian Grove rulings?
no, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You could try. You could try it out.
Well, I guess the main question is what happens if Blood Moon enters the battlefield and then Dryad versus what happens if Dryad enters the battlefield and then Blood Moon? Because I'm told that those two things are different, but I don't know exactly why or in what way.
Huh. I couldn't even tell you. Here, let me bring up Dryad. When you play an additional land on each of your turns, lands you control are basic land types, or every basic land type in addition to their other types. So my guess is that if Dryad is already in play, and then you play a Blood Moon, that your lands are both mountains and every land type. But if the Blood Moon is already in play, and then you play the Dryad, that your non-basic lands are just mountains. It's possible
Wow.
that, yeah, that's my guess. We'll see though. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an expert on Blood Moon or Dryad of the Elysian Grove, so you'll have to ask someone more versed.
Chat seems to think that we're right about the order mattering, but wrong about the conclusion. Chat says
Oh,
the
okay.
most recent one takes precedence.
Oh, so it's the other way around. So if Blood Moon is already in play, and then Dryad enters the battlefield, then your non-basic lands that were previously mountains are basic lands of every land type. But if Dryad is in play and then a Blood Moon hits, then your your lands that were every land type are now just mountains. I guess that kind of makes sense.
But in any case, the Valakut will be shut off no matter what.
Which
And
seems
in
like the
any
biggest
case, your basic lands should be able to tap for any color no matter what.
one. Also important.
So
So
hopefully those two easy ones I'm able to get correct.
yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right there.
All right, and then what happens if somebody plays a dress down after those two things? And then there's a Mutavault that had been activated prior to the Blood Moon entering the battlefield.
Wow. Well, so the dress down shuts off the Dryad, which would mean that the Blood Moon is still working. So the Mutavault would just be a mountain. But anyways, let's get back to a little more realistic situations here. We've got the turn 1 crashing footfalls for Cedric. You don't hate to see it on turn 1 as much as you would hate to see it later. It's not wonderful, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, so if you think from Cedric's perspective that, the game, for me to win, I'm gonna have to win the battle over Teferi Time Raveler and or Chalice of the Void anyway, then the suspend is not that bad because we've seen these players, how they're willing to pace the game and take their time to try to set up a more robust winning situation. So, I don't mind this opening from Cedric, especially if he does have a Cascade card in addition, especially if he does have some, Force of Negation, Mystical Dispute type of cards to help him win the key battles.
Luckily for Cedric, his hand is looking pretty excellent. He's got the upkeep ice to keep Alex from developing his board on these pivotal turns, and then he's got multiple different Cascade spells that he can cast on his third turn. So basically, as good as it could be going for Cedric here, except for the fact that Alex just cast a Chalice for 0.
Yeah, so both players in theory have what they want. That on the play turn 2 ice draw is pretty brutal out of Temur Rhinos. But now Alex plays the untapped land and the Chalice, representing, possible Veil of Summer. From Cedric's perspective, he'd have to worry about Spell Pierce, Fluster Storm, Mystical Dispute type stuff. But yeah, it's all about Cedric now being able to destroy this Chalice. We know that his answers include Prismari Command, they include Boseiju Who Endures. They include Ottawara Soaring City, and that might be about where it ends.
Yeah, I mean, especially if Alex has a Veil, it's going to be really tough for Cedric. Oh, that's a Blood Moon. Oh, that's a big one. So, I mean, maybe at this point, if you're Cedric, you're not even as worried about the fact that your opponent has a Chalice on 0 anymore, and you're just like, hey, I'm trying to stick my Blood Moon. I don't know if your deck can even function on what few basic lands that you have with my Blood Moon having resolved. So, went from
Go ahead.
I was gonna say went from a game where I was feeling pretty worried for Cedric to feeling like he's in a really commanding position.
Yeah, this has been a theme so far on our broadcast of you and I thinking like the Rhino player is dead to a Chalice, but then the Rhino player just playing some totally unrelated, like devastating mid-range card. In this case, it's Blood Moon, and Alexander is going to. I mean, is the plan to do what we were talking through earlier of playing a Dryad to kind of trump or overwrite the Blood Moon effect?
I'd say that's probably one of his best options. But the even bigger question is, if he finds a Dryad, how's he going to cast it? He doesn't even have a basic forest. He opted to fetch up a basic island in response to this Blood Moon so that he could get things going with this expressive iteration. And the iteration didn't resolve. So now, I mean, hoping he has another one so they can find some lands. Yeah, he does have another one, which is huge, but he's still not out of the water. If you're Alex, you're just hoping to find that one basic forest that you have here because a fetch land to find it isn't enough.
Yeah, for those wondering, Alex's fetch land at the time of the Blood Moon being cast was Flooded Strand, so he had no opportunity to get the basic forest. What you mentioned, Noah, of Alex just digging for that basic forest, Cedric seems aware of that, and he's fighting over the expressive iterations. Costing himself 2 cards out of the hand to Force of Negation the first one. Now we have the Crashing Footfalls being cast into the Chalice. Cedric kind of, just making sure it is in a tournament setting the Chalice player's responsibility to note the spell being countered, its triggered ability.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, basically Cedric's like, I gotta cast a spell anyways. It's done. It's done with its suspend. So we'll see if it resolves. I think that Cedric has a Shardless Agent in his hand, and I'm a little bit surprised to not have seen him cast it to try to get things going. And
Right, so that is a basic forest on the lower side of Cedric's screen, right?
I think he has basic forest, basic island. I'm not positive, but I think that is what his mana setup is. Um,
Oh, and speaking of basic forest, Noah, get a load of
yeah,
Alex. Get a load of Alex's battlefield
man,
now.
must be nice, just having one basic force in your deck and just drawing it off the top when your opponent has Blood Moon. No, I mean that Alex has to be happy to see that one, right? He's like, man, I just want to cast some spells. I'm just trying to play the game. Found a really good one to make that happen for him. So, and then it looks like another expressive iteration, which is basically the best possible card that he could have here on these limited mana. So
Yeah, so you think about like how bad a Blood Moon could potentially be for this four color deck, and it has not been anywhere near that bad for Alex because he was able to fetch the basic island. It just so happened that he had multiple expressive iterations as spells that he could cast and use his mana in his turns effectively. And then yeah, he just drew that basic forest. So he's not out of the woods. We won't go that far, but against an opponent who really doesn't have a lot of pressure. I like Alex's position here. I think he's going to be able to have a good chance of fighting through this Blood Moon.
Cedric can find an answer for this chalice fairly quickly. I think that the fact that Alex is getting all of these turns where he's kind of not necessarily developing his board, but he's building up a really strong hand, having a lot of spells where he's going to be able to just like get some good advantage. So I'd say, as weird as it is, Cedric's days are a little bit numbered. He can't just sit around here forever and just stare down this chalice.
One unfortunate dynamic is Cedric's main answer being Prismari Command. That actually is vulnerable to Veil of Summer if Alex has that.
Yeah, and it looks like Alex does have this Veil of Summer, but from Alex's side, it's also looking like he can't really cast too much of anything. Looking like his hand has a
Yeah,
couple Omnaths that are not very castable, a Dovin's Veto, so he's
he drew
not.
the forest, but he hasn't found the Dryad. Dryad is an important one here because Cedric's main answer is subtlety, which is fine and good, but in a world where the game is just going on indefinitely with no attacks, no blocks, no pressure, like Alex could just cast that two turns in a row and wind up winning the game.
Totally. We've got some beautiful magic here. We've got a Blood Moon stopping Alex from casting any spells, and then we've got a Chalice of the Void stopping Cedric from cascading into any Crashing Footfalls. So we really just are seeing every turn go by, not much happening, just play a land, go, or Alex hasn't even been lucky enough to have lands here. He's just discarding his hand full of potent threats. Oh, I guess I'll discard this Dobin's Veto this turn. Oh, I don't need the third Omnath in my hand. I guess I'll just get rid of that one.
Does it remind you of Legacy, Noah, where sometimes you get these just heinous games where
Oh, it
people are
does.
are locked under the lock pieces and no one can do anything?
Yeah, it's definitely very legacy-esque, right? Not too many game actions have been played in this game, and all the ones that have were just super duper potent. It was like this chalice is going to stop you from doing the main thing that you want to do, and Cedric was like, well, this blood moon is going to stop you from casting anything. So really interesting.
And you suggested a very legacy play earlier, which is like, oh, I would just cast Shardless Agent as a 2/2. Let my crashing footfalls get countered, but 2/2 on this board would have dealt 16 damage by
See,
now,
yeah, not so bad. Two adds up quick when it's every single turn and nothing else is happening. That's for sure. But luckily for Cedric, he found one of these Prismari commands, which is exactly what he was looking for. Going to be met with a Veil of Summer, and then he's going to follow it up with this Force Negation. So
All
perfect.
right, Cedric winning a big fight here. Is this? I'm gonna guess that it's Alex's end step that Cedric picked this fight.
Yeah, I think so. Just based on the fact that he was able to alternate cost use this Force Negation. So yeah, I'm guessing it was an end step. And then we
And
might.
yeah, the Blood Moon. Let's give credit. Like it is paying dividends here. It shuts off Alex's ability to cast multiple spells. It shuts off Dovin's Veto entirely. It shuts off Teferi Time Raveler entirely. And now Cedric back in the driver's seat, freeing himself up from Chalice. You got to expect he's got several of these Cascade cards. And he resolves Crashing Footfalls. The limiting factor might actually be the number of Crashing Footfalls in the deck because we know one already got countered. this is at least the second one resolving, and then if the game goes long enough, it's not out of the question he could run out.
Totally. Only a couple more crashing footfalls left. If Alex is able to string together, a good turn, maybe start off with a little Dryad of the Elysian Grove, kind of unlock his mana, so to speak, so that he can use the spells in his hand, he might be able to chain together some answers to these Rhinos, maybe a Leyline Binding here or there. So these next few turns are going to define the game, certainly.
This is Cedric main phasing a Violent Outburst to push some extra damage. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I like it, honestly. If you're Cedric here, you're kind of like, hey, you can't cast spells. I just want to get you dead as quick as possible. I'm
you
gonna
definitely can't cast Supreme Verdict. You're multiple steps away from that.
Yeah.
Engineered Explosives, you did point out there's one copy that Alex has available to him.
If you're Cedric and you get Engineered Explosives here after main phase in your Violent Outburst, you're gonna be so sad because as you were saying, Reed, there's only one copy of Crashing Footfalls left in Cedric's deck. So
that may actually have been an upkeep Violent Outburst, because I saw Cedric draw a card after the outburst resolves. And so why would you do that? Well, you might choose to do that if you only had one copy of Crashing Footfalls in your deck and you want to make sure you didn't accidentally draw it.
wait, Alex drew the Engineered Explosives.
Wow.
There's
Oh my
no way.
god. This game is like, it's like if it was a fictional game and you were writing each turn to be as wild and unexpected as possible.
Yeah, that is something. Wow, and just looking at the players' faces, they feel like the same way. Alex just kind of shaking his hand and heads like, yeah, like, I drew the EE, it's true. And Cedric being like, I guess that's a-okay. Like, I really don't want to be letting this resolve, but there's nothing I can do about it. So, wow.
Yeah. And you can always subscribe to Honorog's channel if you want to see what the writers have in store for season 3. We're gonna have some amazing stuff for you.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, and Cedric just looking honestly kind of taken aback now. He was commandingly in the driver's seat here, just with these Rhinos, and now he's kind of thinking, how am I gonna win now? I only have this one. Oh, and the other copy of Crashing Footfalls, you know where it is, Reed? In his hand. So
Right.
his cascade spells are just completely shut off now, and so that's why he decided, I'm gonna need to put on pressure somehow. Let me cast this subtly.
And that was off the treasure that he made from the Prismari command.
Yep,
which we talked about, the Prismari command versus the Flame of Anor, everything coming full circle here. But yeah, Noah, can we snapshot that decision that Cedric made of casting Violent Outburst on his own turn? Like, it ended up being the worst possible decision for him because he got blown out by that one of Engineered Explosives. But what's your thinking on that? What are the pros and cons? How would you approach a decision like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough when you're Cedric, right? Because you don't know exactly how. I assume it's not open deck list, right? Like they don't
Correct.
know,
They do not know one another's deck lists.
Yeah, so you don't know exactly what Alex's deck looks like. And wait, was
that subtlety? That was subtlety going all the way.
I think it was
a roller coaster.
Wow, but yeah. Anyways, I think that for Cedric, it's a really tough decision because you know that a lot of the answers in Alex's deck are 1-for-1s. So you don't want to just be playing this sort of game where you don't put on enough pressure with your cards, and then Alex is able to pick them off easily. And also, when you're Cedric, you know that the Blood Moon that you have in play is shutting off so many of Alex's plays that you want to put on the pressure as quickly as possible. So I definitely respect, not being scared of the possibility of Engineered Explosives, not being scared of the possibility of Supreme Verdict, and just wanting to end the game as quickly as possible, and it ends up that Alex had the Engineered Explosives and he was still able to take it down. So
yeah, such a cool match and such a cool game 3 there. We saw the gameplay decisions mattering. Well, we'll even circle back to game number 2, Cedric with the cool fire ice play on the untapped fetch land. The decision about the upkeep violent outburst was very meaningful. These deck building choices, the one of Blood Moon, the one of Engineer Explosives, the Prismari command making the treasure, which then unlocked subtlety under the Blood Moon, which was the game-winning card. So we really had it all in that 3-game set there between two really awesome players. Cedric Phillips, fan favorite, advancing to 2-0 with Temur Rhinos. But, if you ask me, we might not have seen the last of Alexander Lim either with his Bring to Light Scapeshift deck.
Totally agree with you there. Alex being at 1-1, he's not down and out. And Cedric really showing us, he's not only a commentator, he doesn't only just cast these events, he's came to game.
He's got moves too, yeah.
Yeah, he's got some moves.
Well, let's see what we can learn from our backup feature match. We have more Magic to show you. This is Michael Lee against Mitch Kaleko. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Mitch, but we have Temur Rhinos once again. Buckle up and be ready to see a lot of Temur Rhinos over the course of the weekend here, because it is a prevalent and successful deck. It's not only going to be widely played, but it's likely to rise to the top as just a very, very strong, good choice in Modern right now. But Amulet Titan, especially in the hands of a skilled pilot, is very scary as well. And here we see Mitch with not only Primeval Titan, but also the One Ring on the battlefield. I was wondering when we were going to see this card, Noah. Well, correction, not on the battlefield.
Yeah, almost on the battlefield, wanting to be on the battlefield. A tough one for Mitch. Looks like he was really looking forward to possibly just getting some card advantage off of this One Ring. It's strange because normally you think, oh, Primeval Titan is the king in a matchup like this, right? It's a 6/6 creature. Temur Rhinos doesn't have too many clean answers to it. But on the other side, these Rhinos do a great job of just straight up double blocking the Primeval Titan. So yeah, the Titan makes it so that these Rhinos can't really attack, but the Rhinos make it so the Titan can't attack either.
Yeah, the old blocking player's advantage, which comes up in limited Magic, and every once in a while comes up in constructed as well.
Yeah, and here we see the subtlety. Yeah, I was really curious why Michael actually decided to, use the alternate cost on the Force of Negation that he cast earlier this turn on the One Ring. But now it all makes sense to me. He decided, I want my subtlety to be a threat as well as have the opportunity to get the ability on it, and I want to get it going kind of soon. So really heads up play there from Michael, just kind of deciding the card advantage for me right now is much less important than using all of my cards and using all of my mana this turn. So
yeah, so very, very well navigated there. If you think you're going to cast Force of Negation and Subtlety in the same turn, you definitely want the Subtlety to resolve as the spell, because then you get the 3/3. So good forethought, good planning. Unclear if it's going to be enough, because that Titan is, just ultra powerful. You don't often see an Amulet Titan player resolve their namesake card and lose the game. But it could happen, and Michael Lee, with his back against the wall, wants to give himself the maximum chance of being able to steal this game.
and it's really scary if you're Michael, because Mitch still at 20 life. So this subtlety, it might be a 3/3, it might have flying. It's going to take a long time for Michael to really get down to Mitch's life total. So if you're Mitch, maybe just to find an answer for one Rhino, or apply another Titan, something like that. And if you're Michael, you really don't have just 7 turns to sit back and attack with your subtlety and hope that takes it over. So he's going to need a little bit more to get this game going.
Very true. And one thing that the Temur color combination is not great at doing is removing a 6/6 creature from the battlefield.
A bit scary.
He's reaching for the Rhino tokens, though, so that makes me think maybe, Burn Spell to help double team and win the fight against the Titan.
That is interesting. What card could he? Yeah, it could be a what? Like, you could have fire, ice to possibly finish it off. Maybe a flame of Anar. Looks like, you know, Michael's list has 3 flame of Anars in the 75, but that card doesn't seem too, great here, especially post board. So we will see. But also, if Michael had a card like, Fire Ice here, he might want to try to set up a little bit better of a scenario where he just attacks here with the Subtle D, passes the turn to Mitch, and then uses this Fire Ice to tap down the Primeval Titan, and then follow that up with, a big swing the next turn, and that way not getting attacked by the Primeval Titan, still getting in this attack with these Rhinos and replacing itself. A lot of interesting decisions going on here.
All right, so redrawing the Dryad.
So what we do know about is the Otawara.
Yeah. No doubt.
It's looking like Michael's planning on leaving these Rhinos back to possibly block this turn. It doesn't look like Mitch is too interested in attacking, as he hasn't been attacking, any of these past turns very, very much. Oh, and just as I say that, he said, actually, it's time. I would like to attack this time. So I would say that's actually pretty heads up from Mitch. When Michael, is out here planning on using the Otawara. But I think maybe Mitch has decided, I want this game. Oh, he just has Valaka in play, right? So
yes. So what's going to happen here is Mitch is going to search for 2 lands, trigger his Valakut, and Michael is going to try to bounce the Dryad in response and actually kill the Titan in combat. Now, that's a plan that will work in theory, but Mitch has some agency over, is he going to move all in on the Valakut plan? Is he going to take sort of a middle ground where he can put himself in a situation to rebuild if things go wrong? So let's see. I can't tell with the glare what lands he searched for, but if it involves a bounce land, he might pick up that Teleria West so that he can restock with a Summoner's Pact at a later time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Mitch here went for, I wouldn't say like the max greed line, but I'd say like the max damage line here. I think he went for another Valakut and then as well as a Vesuva copying Valakut. So he really went all in on the, I want to be, triggering my Valakuts. And it's not going to pay off too well for him with this Otawara in hand for Michael.
Wow. Oh, so Michael's plan is actually working here. He gets the favorable trade of Rhino token against Primeval Titan. He does not die to the Valakuts, which that's a win right in and of itself. The good news for Mitch is that he can replay the Dryad and now have access to all of these Valakuts, but with the Titan no longer on the battlefield, they're not quite as deadly. All right,
but it's still 3 Valakuts, which is a lot of damage.
Yep, and 1 gets to go face because remember that Rhino token had taken damage in combat.
Really showing the power of Dryad of the Lissing Grove here. Like, yeah, Primeval Titan resolved. Yeah, Primeval Titan attacked. Got a lot of triggers. That has a lot to do with it. All these lands in play, but just showing that just the Dryad in play, you don't even need any other big creatures in play. You just need, some lands, Valakut and some lands, and you can get the job done.
Yeah, so that's Amulet Viking taking that down on the strength of Dryad plus Valakut. Not a huge shock, as I mentioned. Once the Titan, sticks on the battlefield for the Amulet player, they often find a way to win. But as that game illustrated, sometimes the path is a little bit circuitous, and that was not necessarily how I predicted the game was going to end there. But now we know Temur Rhinos is mortal as well, as we've seen a couple Temur Rhinos winners in our feature match area, and their Amulet Titan taking it down over yet a third Temur Rhinos deck. But we have lots of great Magic to show you over the course of the weekend, so Noah and I will be back after a short break.